Pope Francis has expressed his alarm about how many couples are rejecting having families and instead are focusing their energies on their pets. In off-the-cuff remarks during his recent visit to Indonesia, the Holy Father praised the nation for its comparatively high birth rate. "Your nation has a high birth rate and please continue in this," the Pope said, adding, "You offer an example of this to other countries." This might make one laugh, but there are some families that seem to prefer to have a cat or dog. But this doesn't work, he added. The Holy Father has repeatedly made similar remarks. Indeed, it has become one of his most recurrent themes. Over and over again, Pope Francis has critiqued the peculiar modern form of Western decadence that sees young couples pursuing lives of wealth and pleasure rather than embracing the meaningful enterprise of starting and raising a family. Frequently, he links this choice to a widespread loss of spiritual vitality and hope. Just a few weeks ago, the podcaster Lex Fridman asked Musk what America would have to do in order to avoid the fate that has faced so many other failed empires, their downfall and eventual historical irrelevance. Musk's answer? Increase the birth rate. When civilizations are winning for too long, the birth rate declines, Musk noted. It can often decline quite rapidly. We're seeing that throughout the world today. He added, at a fundamental level, if a civilization does not at least maintain its numbers, it'll disappear. As news out of Japan this month indicates, Musk's alarmism is well-rooted in fact. The nation recently reported that the number of births in January of this year was the lowest level in decades and dropping 5% from the previous year. Japan's birth rate is already the lowest in the world, at a catastrophically low 1.2 children born per woman. This is so far below the replacement birth rate 2.1 children born per woman that Japan is already undergoing rapid depopulation. Demographers project that Japan's population will decline by half by 2100. The remaining population will be skewed heavily towards the elderly, with all the economic and social difficulties that poses. Whereas Japan is the furthest along the trajectory of demographic winter and depopulation, many other developed nations are not far behind. Instead of being led by the hysteria of the moment, the Church and those formed by her wisdom have consistently used solid anthropological principles to respond to the complexities of the demographic question, coming to dramatically different conclusions than the professional demographers. On this score, it is well worth revisiting a famous 1994 letter by Pope St. John Paul Roman II to the Secretary General of the United Nations. The letter, penned 30 years ago, provides a model for how the Church draws upon a deep wisdom to examine and respond to difficult questions, avoiding the temptation to view such questions through the lens of the fleeting ideas or values of the moment. In looking back, it is beautiful to behold just how far ahead of his time Pope St. John Paul Roman II was. While our experts and professional thought class are only now waking up to the consequences of decades of overpopulation hysteria, Pope St. John Paul Roman II saw right through it 3 decades ago. John Paul the Roman II has the answer. The Holy Father begins the letter by noting that the global population situation is very complex. There are variations not simply from continent to continent, but even from one region to another. Already, we see the wisdom of the Church at play. Since at least the late 1960s, population experts had sold a simplistic version of events in which the world was overpopulated, and in which the world must therefore respond. In reality, as Pope St. John Paul Roman II noted, population density differs drastically from one region to another. In the developed world, he noted, projections were even then projecting a rapid decrease in the global rate of population growth, to begin during the 1990s and carry on into the new century. Meanwhile, he noted, it is true that population growth rates remain high in some of the least developed nations of the world. Thus, any attempt to impose a one-size-fits-all solution is already grossly misguided. Even worse, however, would be to attempt to impose a solution to a supposed problem that fails to respect fundamental, ironclad ethical principles. Thus, even before diving into the details of the demographic problem, the sainted Pope reminds his readers of the core principles that must guide any discussion of the issue. Pope St. John Paul Roman II proposes 4 such ethical principles. These are: that each and every person, regardless of age, sex, religion, or national background, has a dignity and worth that is unconditional and inalienable. That human life itself from conception to natural death is sacred. That human rights are innate and transcend any constitutional order. That the fundamental unity of the human race demands that everyone be committed to building a community which is free from injustice and which strives to promote and protect the common good. In other words, no matter how dire the overpopulation alarmists think the problem may be, there can be no excuse for proposing solutions that violate these fundamental principles. A pragmatic ethics which recognizes no absolute ethical guardrails will not only fail to produce legitimate solutions, but is also far more likely to produce greater injustices, adding to, rather than alleviating, human suffering.